The time has come to finally give you my top 10 favourite films of 2024. But first, my honourable mentions: Nosferatu, Late Night with the Devil, Challengers, Hitman, I Saw the TV Glow, A Different Man, The Apprentice, The Brutalist, Better Man, I can't believe how good that film actually was, Transformers 1, and Longlegs. So with that done and out of the way, let's get into the top 10. And starting off at number 10, I'll give you a hint. Yeah, this is where for some people my top 10 list immediately loses credibility, but I do not care. Deadpool and Wolverine might just be the most purely enjoyable and entertaining cinema experience I had in 2024. Even though Disney and Marvel insisted that Deadpool was going to remain rated R, there was still some concern and worry that he was going to feel Disneyfied and they were going to tone him down, but that was not the case. It was still rated R in every glorious possible way. The violence, the humor, the fourth wall breaking. This is by far, in my opinion, the funniest Deadpool film, the funniest Marvel film ever made. All the fan service and all the cameos and guest appearances I loved. And perhaps most impressively and most thankfully, this film justified Hugh Jackman's return as Wolverine. This is the kick in the junk that Marvel needed, and they're on a pretty good roll right now, and their 2025 slate looks really promising, especially with that Fantastic Four trailer yesterday. So let's hope that they can crush it this year and we can get back to that MCU magic. Coming in at number 9 is Conclave. Going into this film, the number one thing I read was that Ralph Fiennes was incredible and he's going to get an Oscar nomination. And I thought it was going to be one of those kind of award season type films where it's purely a vehicle for its main star and the film itself is not as good as the main star that's in it. But that was not the case. Conclave is one of the more surprising thrillers I've seen in recent memory because it's a film about a bunch of cardinals in the Vatican trying to decide who the next pope is. And I just never thought that premise would be as intense and suspenseful as it was in the film. Even as someone who's not remotely religious, I felt the pressure that Cardinal Lawrence was under and the consequences and the magnitude of what would happen if they chose the wrong pope. You don't have to be religious to appreciate Conclave as a film. I'm living, breathing proof of that. Number 8 was a big favourite for a lot of people in 2024 and rightfully so, The Wild Robot. The Wild Robot kind of came out of nowhere for me. I was aware it was coming out, I saw the trailer and I thought it looked good and we'll see how it goes. And then it came out and it just completely took me back to a time where DreamWorks were just crushing it with these types of just really solid, good animated films back in the 2000s and the mid-2000s. It's a human story conveying a lot of human emotions told through non-human characters, in this case animals and a robot. Top it off with incredible animation, really good voice work and a great soundtrack, and you just have a wonderful film called The Wild Robot, which if you haven't watched yet, you should. But for me personally, The Wild Robot was not my favourite animation of 2024. That goes to number 7, which is Inside Out 2. Now the reason I put Inside Out 2 above The Wild Robot is because Inside Out 2 spoke to me on a much deeper and a much more personal level. Again, The Wild Robot has those human emotions and those life lessons, but on a much broader scale. Inside Out 2, with its depiction of anxiety, it just really resonated with me and hit me so much to the core because in the last 2 years I have experienced that anxiety whirlwind and the scenes where anxiety is commissioning all the emotions to, think of all these scenarios that could happen. What could happen if this happens and this happens and this happens? And I just understood it. Again, I've experienced that exact thing in the past year and a half, 2 years or so. And it just blew me away with the emotional intelligence, which is just what is so amazing about both of these Inside Out films. The depiction of emotions and the human experience through the story of Riley as a young girl. It's just something that I think anybody can watch and relate to and connect to and just tear up when you watch it because of just how good it is and how they just nail the depictions of all these emotions. And it's probably Pixar's best franchise. I know my inner child is screaming Toy Story, but seriously, when it comes to the writing and the execution and just the emotional resonance, the depth, the weight, the Inside Out franchise, it's got to be just the best series of films that Pixar has done, just 2 films in. Coming in at number 6 is another big favourite for a lot of people last year, and that's The Substance. I was quite late to this film, I didn't do a video for it, but I was blown away by The Substance. It was very unique and it stands out visually and tonally. The directing in here, I can't remember the director's name, put it on the screen, I apologise because she needs to be known. She got a directing nomination at the Oscars, very deservedly so, because I was really just struck by the visuals of this thing. But I was really surprised by the story of this one, the body horror elements mixed with some really, really good subtext. Like everyone else has said by now, it's a really good slap in the face examination of absurd beauty standards in not just Hollywood, but in the world nowadays. But also, you know, the price of stardom, how far you're willing to go to be famous. Some really good stuff to chew on, and it doesn't feel preachy, it doesn't feel like it's being shoved down your throat. In fact, it's emotionally resonant, because I started to feel really bad for Elizabeth Sparkle as the more she takes this substance, as the more she starts experiencing the high of being young again, it just starts to wear on her body, literally. And it's also a really good subtext and examination of drug addiction as well. I guess what I'm trying to say is the substance, like August, has layers, and I was really, really surprised by it. And the finale with Monstro Ilizasu is one of the most batshit crazy things I've seen in a film in quite a while. Number 5 is another film I was quite late to, but I'm really glad I saw it before doing this list, and that's Sing Sing. These days, I'm really a big sucker for films that convey how powerful art can be and what art can do for you as a human being. And this film just really, really ticks those boxes, because it's, of course, the rehabilitation through the arts program in the Sing Sing Correctional Facility, and the prisoners are there in the theatre group, and they're acting and they're rehabilitating themselves through acting in these plays, and they're bringing themselves out, they're expressing themselves, their emotions, how they feel, and they're changing and evolving as people through these performances in these plays. And I adored that so much. And again, it just shows how meaningful and powerful art can be, and how important art and storytelling is to us as a species. Can you tell I loved it? Because I really loved it, and it hit me a few times emotionally. Colman Domingo is amazing. I am shocked that Clarence Macklin did not get a Best Supporting Actor nomination, because he is so awesome, and it's really great that he essentially plays himself in the film. I loved all the scenes of the inmates just sat in a circle and talking about the play, talking about the characters they want to play, and also just talking about themselves, their lives, again, rehabilitating themselves through this entire theatre program. It's a wonderful film. If you haven't watched it, just please watch it. If you want to feel good about something, and if you want to see how great and powerful art can be, watch Sing Sing. You will not be disappointed. Number 4 is a film that when I first saw it, it made the top 10 straight away, but around number 8, number 7, but I thought about it, and it climbed all the way to number 4, and that's a real pain. This was such a tender, nice, emotional character bonding film, and I love those kinds of films. When they're really good, they're really, really good. Jesse Eisenberg is also in the film, and he plays his usual awkward self, but it completely works for his character. And Kieran Culkin, he is my personal pick for Best Supporting Actor at the Oscars this year, because I loved his character, I loved his out view of the world, but his backstory is also really sad, and you completely understand why both of these characters are the way they are, with their personalities, their outlooks on life, and how they just kind of contrast each other and relate to each other and connect to each other. Great chemistry with Eisenberg and Culkin, but it's also really funny as well. There's a line early on that just made me chuckle. If you've seen my Letterboxd review of the film, you know the line I'm talking about, the genocide line. Again, this is one of those films where the more you think about it, the more you love it. And again, it's climbed all the way up to my number 4 spot in my top 10 of the year. Number 3 is the most recent addition to this list, and that is A Complete Unknown. This is a 2-hour and 15-minute long hangout with Bob Dylan in 1960s New York as he's writing songs and progressing through the folk music scene in New York. And I loved every single second of this brisk, easygoing film. Like I said in the video I did for the film, I just loved how comfortably paced this film was. It really suited Bob Dylan as a person. Timothée Chalamet blew me away as Bob Dylan. He became Bob Dylan on screen, with him actually learning the instruments and singing for real in the film. Loved all the performance scenes. I've listened to the Timothée Chalamet version of all these Bob Dylan songs from the film soundtrack on Spotify over and over again since the film came out. The film captures its time, place, and vibe tremendously well, and I cannot wait to get this on Blu-ray and just sit back, relax, and absorb myself into this film once again. Okay, top 2 time. Now, this year, 2024, I struggled with the top 2. I did not know what to put at number 1 and 2, because you know how some years you have a film that you consider to be the best film of the year, and then there's another film that's your personal favourite film of the year. That's me this year with the top 2, and I've decided to go with my heart on this one. So that is why My number 2 film of 2024 is Dune Part 2. I saw Dune twice in cinemas and I finally rewatched it again on Blu-ray just a couple of days ago, and it is now retrospectively my first 5-star film of 2024. You see, when Dune Part 1 came out, a lot of people were saying that it was like the next Lord of the Rings, and I just didn't really understand it at the time. Not that I didn't like Dune Part 1, I really liked it, but the whole Lord of the Rings comparison, I was just kind of confused by. But when Dune Part 2 came out, I immediately understood what people were saying, because it's a huge, massive scale genre story. Lord of the Rings fantasy, this being sci-fi, kind of sci-fi fantasy. But it's put together and conceived and envisioned by a true visionary filmmaker. This is not a piece of shit put together product by a committee or studios just trying to tick boxes. This is a filmmaker with a vision, and he just puts it on the screen in the most giant, awe-inspiring possible way possible. The way Denis Villeneuve brings the world of Arrakis to life and conveys the mythology of this universe is nothing short of enthralling, awe-inspiring, and just all around outstanding. The story of Paul Atreides becoming the Lisan al-Gaib, the Mawahib Deeb, Usul of the Fremen. See, the fact that I can even remember those names, the hard names to remember, but I remember them, that just shows it right there. The visual effects, Hans Zimmer's musical score, it all comes together to create a truly epic experience. The word epic, I think, is kind of overused nowadays to describe films, but Dune Part 2 100% deserves that word. It is epic in every sense of the word. But it does not make my number 1 of the year. And I think I'm going to surprise a lot of people with this, but I've decided that I'm going to have my personal favourite film of 2024 as my number 1 of the year. And thus, my favourite film of 2024, to my surprise, is Wicked. I'll say it like this. Whenever I think about Wicked, and I think of the story, I think of the characters, I think of the acting, I think of the music, I listen to the soundtrack on Spotify like I have for the past 2 to 3 months, it makes me happy. When this film came out in cinemas, I saw it twice, I was just in this zone of just non-stop thinking about this film. And again, every single time I did think about it, it just made me forget about everything. All my problems, all the stuff that plagues my mind on a near daily basis, all my anxieties, all my worries, everything disappeared when I thought about Wicked and when I listened to the soundtrack on Spotify. I haven't experienced this kind of escapist euphoria with a film in so many years. And it surprises me that I have this kind of reaction to the film because I've never ever seen the play. I'm not a Wicked nutcase from the stage performance. I'm a Wicked nutcase because of the feature film instead. Cynthia Erivo is still my pick for Best Actress. Ariana Grande is my pick for Best Supporting Actress. The relationship, the friendship between Elphaba and Glinda, and just the themes of friendship and acceptance and, Elphaba becoming her own person and embracing her differences. It didn't feel forced to me. I know for some people, I know my brother saw 5 minutes of it and just rolled his eyes and found it whatever, but it all worked for me. It all resonated for me, and the whole film, I just gotta say, for me was magical. It was just a spectacular, magical, special film to me. The Defying Gravity sequence is one of the best sequences that I've seen in a film in years. Just sensational. Absolutely a bewitching, sensational film. I think I'm willing to say it's in my top 5 musical films of all time. I would love it if it won Best Picture at the Oscars. It probably most definitely won't. But if it did, I would just be doing cartwheels. Again, Dune 2, I'd say quality-wise is the best film of 2024, but Wicked is my personal favourite film of 2024. And I've let my heart speak in this one, and I've put my favourite of the year as my number 1 of the year, and Wicked is my number 1 film of 2024. So there you have it. Those are my top 10 favourite films of 2024. And yeah, it was a great year for films, some really, really good stuff, and I'm excited to get a lot of those Blu-rays, watch all those films again, especially Wicked. So what are your favourite films of 2024? Tell me in the comments. And now, let's just jump right in to 2025 and see what this year's got in store for us, cinematically speaking.